It was 100 years later that spirit power finally took hold as the very life force driving the entire universe. The wind whispered through the trees as spirits of all kinds changed, and now there were two new ways to live. One where your body grew stronger, but you felt like a wild child running from danger, while the other let your heart fly toward light with powerful, glowing strikes that sent fear away. You were looking at your phone while the world felt weird, wondering how anyone could develop these strange spirits just like you. Then he saw that someone got bit by ghostly thorns and asked what to do with it. The silver-haired man, sprawled out on his own bed, finally asked the person staring at him if he was going to panic or would have drunk all that hot water just for being there. He pointed to a nice room with fresh air and told them to get down and let their bodies rest so they didn't smell like rotting. The cat's big paw stretched toward the person, and his fur began to shake as he said, "Oh, you're really hot." The tenacious creature, Smarty, who had been named after 1,000 questions, barked at Lin Yuan as the heat rose. When it saw the air grow too cool near the summit, it decided to try climbing Yuan's very head instead of staying down there. Yuan stared at him with a grin so big it felt like the sky had fallen when he stopped looking up from the mountain. The air inside the house was suddenly filled with the scent of fresh spring as Smarty laughed aloud at the wind blowing past his door. It felt like the bustling life of a busy neighborhood started right in front of Yuan's window when he dropped his things into the pile. You're 12, but you own a tiny shop where ghosts sell magic spells. People everywhere want to borrow their life force, but Yuan treats it as a forbidden fairy tale that can't be broken by anyone else. His body was already weak after being a kid and couldn't feel spirit energy until he was 8, so he wouldn't even try to help anyone get stronger or meet dangerous spirits. He spotted Lily Luyera in the field because she looked so normal and her quality level dropped from high to low grade while trying to block the sun with a cloth. Smarty watched as she nearly died of heat, thinking she was just one of those green creeper vines that feed on other plants instead of being the best healing spirit type at all. For a long time, the world had been split into tiers based on how rare the spirit key was. Anything below copper quality was seen as trash and ignored almost entirely. Only those with genuine gems would get the chance to build strong lines. And honestly, nobody wanted to waste resources trying to evolve weak creatures when there were so many easier paths open for the true gems. It's as if nobody had ever heard of a question asking what happens to hundreds of living things after they evolve. Inin, a tiny flighty bird that carried the name, the species, landed on Yuan and offered him a warm thanks. He felt so weak that he almost collapsed, only to wake up feeling dizzy from the low-grade creatures he had just contracted under his control. He could barely feel the spirits trying to pull him back to reality, let alone finally reach the spirit key needed to help them level up properly. It took an hour for them to finally look bored. Smarty asked if humans love sleeping because there was still no one on the street. Yuan asked what he meant. He decided to call everyone's attention by telling them that the green creepers had been spotted with a little girl and her mother passing by, who noticed the beast exactly like Keiki was holding. It was like a sudden rainstorm hit the field when Smarty walked in, offering a pile of wet straw to calm the angry cats. Then Keiki stepped forward, pointing out that his fur looked so dry and gray as if it were from years ago, making him look very annoyed at the situation. She laughed as he pushed a rock at her hands, and then challenged them to play rock, paper, scissors, because they both had the guts. Yuan gently told the boy to calm down because his claws were too sharp for playing rock, paper, scissors with those furry hands, and he promised to walk just so he could feel better. Meanwhile, Smarty offered them some fresh meat instead of trying again. He tried to prove his point by claiming that if he ate some more braised pork, he'd definitely become smarter and would have avoided losing. Yuan watched like he was hiding Inin's smile, while Smarty smiled back, saying that even though he wasn't as smart as the other 100 questions beasts, he was cheap. Smarty laughed at him for feeling bad, not being able to sense a spirit key, then shouted that he should just look at his blunt armored pig. And suddenly, he thought something bizarre happened near the farm. Smarty dropped his hat and started drooling while chasing a wild mountain full of braised pork that Yuan had pulled him to eat since he couldn't handle the anger in there. He didn't want to fight, but now he realized that being gentle meant nothing if it made things so furious. The bulldog lunged forward like a storm cloud, sprinting at full speed to catch up with Yuan, who suddenly felt lighter and rested easily as Smarty watched the race unfold in real time. Suddenly, he stumbled and immediately wrapped his arms around Smarty in a tight hug to shield her from the fall. The scary look on Yin's face didn't stop Smarty from rushing over. He grabbed the steaming lump and turned it into a delicious meal right away. You felt like Yuan might be passing out before you realized what happened next. Suddenly, someone named himself, and you found yourself standing there in the middle of a crowd waiting for the next turn of fate. She looked at the shiny copper bracelet that caught her eye. He touched the copper bracelet that had vanished after his blood got on him, realizing the light traveled through it just as the spirit key once did, even though he couldn't feel the key anymore since then. Now he could feel it again. Smarty woke up in a nightmare while running from a giant pig so big it looked like an animal himself. Een pleaded with him to think about something. Yet despite holding a tiny spark of hope, there simply wasn't enough time to do anything at all. His wrist glowed brightly, just like Yuan's left hand. He spotted the status window for this tough-looking piglet named Zai. It looked like a normal grade 3 animal with a defense-type quality that made him instantly worried because Smarty and the others were way below the level 3 threshold. Smarty stepped back so he could avoid a punch that would come from the right side of the room. It wasn't enough to even let him dodge one last time. His power simply couldn't bridge that massive distance between them. He desperately wanted his power to grow and hoped his bracelet would contract into his own hands. He laughed hysterically as he saw Een unleash a wave of sound that sent him to his knees and made everyone stop laughing completely. Yuan watched carefully, realizing his eyes had caught a flash of the same light that Een was holding. Yuan wondered why Smarty and Een were glowing so brightly when his own hand held a magic bracelet, thinking they were going through an exciting evolution on their own. The stout, heavy-boned pig let out a loud roar and howled for all to hear before collapsing under the weight of its own noise. The playful Smarty felt a little too eager and began asking Een about how loud the pig's voice sounded, which made him feel a bit overjoyed that he hadn't been blown away yet. Yuan knew that even if they were evolving, the gap between level 1 and level 3 was still too big. He noticed Smarty's weak point while the braised pork was too strong, so he told Een to sing to get its attention. Any notes would do as long as it was loud enough. She gave her best, but then made a mistake that affected the pig. Luckily for Yuan, she was immune to this after being a sparring partner over 400 times before. The pig blinked at Een with a look of pure surprise as the lady quickly stepped in front of him, letting out a low whistle that seemed to mean "I've caught you." Yuan told her to spin around so she could dodge the dragon's gaze by blocking its view, knowing that without seeing, it would just stop. Een hesitated and looked around nervously as her body began to glow, only for the light to fade away instantly, leaving her unable to use the move any longer. It was Yuan's last moment before his magic finally faded away at its most critical point. The bracelet kept its promise of holding on because he needed it to be there while the story got better. Een gasped for air before she could launch herself at the pig, clutching her feathers as if they were a shield against a storm of energy that had returned. Pig Smarty stood up and waved goodbye as the other animals left for their own company, while he alone shook his head and laughed. Smarty darted toward the pig, aiming specifically for its snout. The pig sprinted for cover and missed the target entirely. That pushed Smarty completely out of his mind. He nodded to confirm the win for Yuan, and Yuan, who felt he'd lost a lot, said yes as they chased away their troubles together. Then he fell back into unconsciousness as Een and Smarty were startled awake by the sudden silence. It was the fastest pig out there, yet something snapped in that moment as it hit an obstacle and paused. A man in a wheelchair sat beside him, while a beast clung to his back. They were all being guided by a woman on her hands and knees. He stared blankly at that oddly shaped pig, wondering exactly why such a blunt armored animal was standing right there. A tiny feather floated out of a pig's cage and landed right in front of the old man's eyes, and then his heart skipped a beat. Oldly heard the fierce beast command her to run, so he can chase after Yuan before he leaves. His crimson eyes widened with shock and realization as he realized he had finally found a way to summon the beast that had saved him. Yuan was suddenly pulled back from the edge of a cliff and found himself standing right on the precipice, staring over the dark water with a heavy heart. It's where his precious bracelet had come from. It helped him feel calm when things got hard, as if it was listening for its own heartbeat. Yuan guessed the size was roughly 40 to 50 square meters, wondering whether that meant that was actually a spirit's hidden home inside. It sounded like a heavy burden that only he could bear. Yuan checks Yuan's spirit creature, Mobius, a strange unknown with mystical traits and 2 basic skills. True Data, which unlocks hidden secrets he can't see yet, and Calm Mind, a passive skill that steadies the spirit against negative effects as it grows. Yuan already knows the power of True Data, but has been guessing whether Calm Mind comes from practicing Een. His surprise is now that this one thing is actually exclusive to bronze-ranked beings. He immediately thinks this might be something legendary or a fantasy breed. Mobius is a magical land where spirits live before they can even get their first level, and it only raises their power when they actually become part of the realm, copying their starting strength while adding nothing new to them as it goes up. After reading the warning, he suddenly understood how dangerous it would be to form such a contract with a level 1 spirit beast. Mobius could only progress once he had raised it all the way to a rank of level 10, and raising even low-rank spirits was already an incredibly costly gamble. He tried to smile at this reality, hoping it made him feel better than nothing, but then the doctor's voice cut through his thoughts. "I'm not awake after half a day." When he finally opened his eyes, Eneen was still nibbling at the spot where Smarty had been slapped earlier, and Smarty was shaking his head frantically, trying to get back on track. He stood up and explained to them how things went wrong with everyone else because the group was too panicked not to get words together, leaving him alone in his own head wondering exactly what had caused such a big fuss. Annie Jiang was suddenly relieved when she saw Yuan finally awake. The doctor had informed her that Annie Jiang was worried sick because Yuan had been unconscious for almost 10 hours and had been given another checkup just in time, though he insisted it wasn't necessary. She told him to get treated if he's sick, especially since a small illness could turn into a big one if he doesn't want to be treated at all. It was the only option he had left after he decided to go home, so he agreed to lay down. Uncle Lee and Annie Jiang from next door were always ready to take good care of him and his little sister, but he didn't want to tell her about forming a contract with Mobius yet. When the doctor grabbed its beast, Yuan saw the data for the spirit creature, a cleansing Vimbicarp in the Soprinity family, who was trained to be an elite 4-level water type with 2 special skills. One where it leaps and strikes with its tail, and another gentle cleanse that soothes mental trauma. The doctor said everything was okay, then turned his attention to the old man who had been waiting in the kitchen while he walked away. The red and white beast of old Lee took over the table for their dinner. Annie Jiang watched as Lee proudly served a healthy dish specifically for Yuan, but she kept her hand firmly off the plate so he wouldn't feel forced into eating it all. But of course, Smarty didn't dare to see that rabbit. He wasn't sure if it smelled good or if it tasted like braised pork. His heart raced because he remembered how the animal had always been so lively and curious. Yet even after taking a look at all its details, there were still only question marks hanging in the air. He finally understood what the terrifying rabbit really was. After getting back from the surgery, Yuan decided to head out and jog. It's been hours since the last run, but he was still running with all that energy left in his system. Since he doesn't have the spirit key attached, he had to put on a new body just so he wouldn't fail again tomorrow. Uncle Lee and Annie Jiang went shopping together to get some fresh veggies, but as they walked home, Uncle Lee suddenly spotted him waiting at the door. He jumped out of his coat and shouted, "Hey, are you up early for a run?" The man smiled as he said, "I'm working hard to stay healthy." When Yuan unleashed his supernatural power against Uncle Lee, the battle revealed a terrifying truth. His weapon wasn't magic, but a twisted, living creature eating bone with an acid-based toxin that turned anyone weak into a mental curse, proving his true rank was at least platinum, and he had no mercy. Uncle Lee locked himself inside the rotting bone of his own silk moth, turning that very piece of flesh into a deadly poison that slowly ate away at his entire body over time. He reasoned that if King were truly there, Uncle Lee's monster likely took on a wounded look as well. But the most terrifying truth was that the man in question must have possessed far more than just any special ability. He wanted to know how to fix Uncle Lee's bad wound after they told him not to worry about Yuan helping them take care of him all along, because knowing the best way to cure would make him feel much better. He stepped out from his old clothes and walked straight toward the first beast there was, the green creeper tucked beneath the Hexastar family's vine, a grassy creature of average grade. He felt so surprised to see that immediately it turned into an elite one when it had only been normal quality yesterday. He saw his own spirit key starting to leak, and suddenly he was channeling the stolen essence into 1,000 tiny spirits, letting them eat and grow stronger until he could finally control it all. He thought about raising the difficulty level and turning that green slime into a special healing Lily Luria for the group. The beast shifted into a Lily Luera plant under the Crassulaceae family Aeonium, and he checked to see that it was an elite grade wood of normal quality with a healing and fragrant skill set that could quickly relieve any tension. It's so much better with the new skills. He smiled as he looked up at Smarty and Eneen to see how much the tool had improved. Eneen cheerfully told him they had leveled up. He checked their stats and found Smarty, the 100-question beast under the Felidae family sapient cat genus, was at normal grade 2 level. This creature is a psychic type with normal quality skills. His skill, precise memory, could accurately remember every last detail when memorizing things. Smarty proudly claims he used to recall 1 piece of braised pork, but now he remembers 30. She found out the warblers were all sounding birds in their own genus, and that Eneen was just grade 3, a regular creature with standard abilities who made her singing so much better she could actually sing. Yuan was so thrilled. He said he'd finally found a magic key, and now everyone is going to get very wealthy. It wasn't just about the money. It felt like a genuine adventure for him. It seemed like finding a new life form was a dream gone wrong. While some wild spirits managed to jump the barrier on their own, Almost all needed a guardian deity to pull them through with a handful of expensive golden potions before they could finally breathe again. And yet he managed to handle every task alone, proving that even in chaos, he had the strength to lead without anyone needing to help him. He discovered an amazing power that countless others had already tried to steal, but it wasn't enough for Yuan to keep his mind at bay while trying to hide the truth from the world. He had learned how to keep his secret safe by becoming an expert at making things. So he used the job as a shield from the danger of being alone with his thoughts, while secretly planning on asking Yinyin and Smarty if they were going to come for him once he was ready. Xia Shui stepped out and told him that she was tired of thinking about him. He smiled and said, "I'm feeling much better now. I thought I'd make a quick trip to clean my backyard." It was a strange surprise that made her nervous. She was worried about his lack of spirit keys and decided to keep the backyard quiet while she got home. He assured her it wasn't a big deal, just some tidying up, and told her there was no need to worry. He reminded her of their promise that she would study hard at school so she wouldn't waste her talent, and she replied that she already planned not to let him go to school for the next 2 days while they contracted their first spirit creatures. It was an important event. The power of that mysterious being depends partly on how much skill they've learned, even if their grades don't matter as much. For fighters who are serious about fighting magic, being able to keep up your fight is the most important thing for you. If a spirit creature doesn't match your own nature, it's likely that your mental strength will crumble under pressure and you'll take massive damage. Even for jobs that require years of practice like weaving or crafting, you can't just pull spirit materials from the air. Instead, your craft needs a deep, long-term understanding of them to actually combine them well. Furthermore, since their class was built around training combat professionals, mixing these powerful beings with your own skills must be considered very carefully by everyone involved. Shui stepped out of the classroom, feeling deeply sad when the teacher asked if she wanted to rethink her spirit creature contract. Although she knew her family situation, her extraordinary talent made reconsidering seem impossible. Now that the Federation's 100 Sun selection was on the line, she had already decided not to let this chance slip away. Yuan sat back down and smiled because his time had finally run out. The guy who made the upgrade to elite grade Lily Lucas just needed 300,000 Federation coins. It should easily pay for that luxury spirit creature he plans to sell to Xue. Suddenly, the phone buzzed and rang out, but there wasn't anyone else in the house waiting for him. He immediately guessed it was a brand new customer, but the timing felt right just as he stepped into his office to make that first call. She pointed to the person across the room and said, "Who is that?" The other speaker smiled and asked, "Are you using him as a guardian?" Then, her eyes narrowed. "He's been told to contract a gray beetle," she explained, clearly showing his power. The teacher told Xue that her affinity range only touched high-grade defenses, so she demanded the guardian prepare an elite defense-type spirit creature for his first contract. She ordered him to send a suitable one within 2 days. He agreed and promised to upgrade all normal green creatures to elite grade before selling them off later that day. He was short on time, so he had to upgrade every single green creature in the school into elite defense type just to get that top-tier spirit creature for Xia Shui the next morning. Zombie Yuan stood up and smiled as the light cleared from his eyes, knowing that having finished on schedule was enough for him. He knew the spirit creature market felt unsafe enough to hide that tiny bracelet under his cloak, knowing nothing could go right there. The young man asked Smarty how sure he really was that he wanted to go with him, and the old gentleman agreed, quoting his own rule about guarding a house. He laughed at the idea of haggling when everyone knew it was a beast's job, noting that Yuan had spotted Smarty becoming stubborn after the ride arrived. Even as he read history books instead of transportation guides, the driver told him to wait behind the yellow line and sped off anyway, leaving the passenger stranded in the open. The driver asked if he hadn't seen the A couple of days ago, but it took 2 full days and nights for Violet Thorn Guards to hunt down all those aberrant insects that poured out and get the situation under control. They say a squad of Violet Thorn Guards were still stationed nearby. A massive rift opened up right beside a spirit creature's breeding farm, crushing life there while some brave employees tried to sell off the injured survivors nearby on the market. They finally realized exactly where the tough-looking pig had escaped. The driver told him, "A bunch of blunt armored pigs escaped. I managed to snag one for a cheap price," while sharing that once the meat was served on the table, his whole family dug in and hung up the rest to cure. Yuan replied, "You're amazing," and he requested to be dropped off at the intersection closest to the stall. It was great since critically injured and disabled spirit creatures definitely won't be too expensive, as there were plenty of bargains to find. Moments later, Yuan arrived at the location and spotted Smarty handing him a green creeper and Lily Laura he'd just bought up last night. The buyer asked what kind of spirit creature they were buying, but Yuan immediately told Smarty to leave everything for he, asking specifically about their budget first. Even though a normal green creeper costs anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000, he still feels short on cash because they trade so much money. Some plants caught his attention because it seemed like they were calling out at him. Now he can clearly feel the instinctive approach and rejection from other spirit creatures. The brighter the light in the pond, the more friendly the aura became around him. He spotted clear ponds, snow lilies, and thousands of jade plants, wondering if his wide reach actually included those rare creatures. He loved healing and support types, so his affinity with defensive spirit beasts felt like an instinctive pull toward them. Smarty showed him a deal that felt much more than a number. He haggled the seller's offer from $80,000 down to $10,000 until the rabbit's final price was $60,000, and Smarty insisted on $20,000. The creature in question is a tough-hide rabbit belonging to the Laporte family, an elite grade 1 with defensive qualities and a skill called Hardened Hide that turns its skin into a tough shield, protecting it from damage. Yuan kindly apologized to the seller after noticing Smarty's foolishness. He felt hurt that he'd been forced to haggle so hard and get the item for a much higher price than he should have earned otherwise. You watched Yuan whisper to him, suggesting they go shopping over first before deciding where to start. The next step in their plan was a land tortoise from species Testidentity, specifically a grade 3 defensive type with good quality. Its special ability, called Enlarge, allows it to grow its body while shrinking its head and limbs into its shell so the armor can block damage better. Yuan got impatient because he knew the grade wasn't high enough and had no time for more training. Smarty agreed that moving slowly was also too much of a problem for them at this point. After they saw the phantom claw fox of the Vulpes/Canis species, a high-grade, defensively built beast made at normal quality, it rolled out and curled its body in an arc while rolling for defense, blocking damage with spirit pack sound that was just as effective as Smarty's. It wasn't much different from him either. Smartly picked up a rough-hide rabbit once more, but Yuan couldn't let go of that idea. His eyes remained fixed on it because he knew he'd have to stay vigilant all along. He looked out from his seat and saw that someone was standing right next to him. It was a magnificent coiled horn sheep under the Caprini ova species, an elite grade 7 rock type with perfect quality and parry skills that let its massive horns block and defend. It also has an assault skill where its large horns slam into targets. But Yuan spotted a perfect quality youngling and even had control-type spirit beast skills. He had everything else except the horn assault, because instead of using those horns, it used shock horns to strike at targets with vibrating sounds that paralyzed them through high-frequency vibrations. Yuan sighed and walked over with a tray of chips and drank his coffee while staring at the bill that cost him 10,000 yuan. The man waited for the phone to ring, knowing he'd have to call his wife soon. Smarty smiled as he told Yuan he had looked at prices online yesterday and found a coiled horn sheep only worth about 50,000 yuan, far less than even a rare one could be, though he'd made sure to act like a nouveau riche before offering. When Yuan explained that he was just being sincere, Smarty laughed and said he still had no idea how much he could get for his green offer. Suddenly, the sellers told him they had sold every single piece of the hard-boiled pork so bad that even a tough-hearted customer would stop thinking about it. He felt like nothing was worth fighting for, especially since all those brave spirit beasts were already dead and nobody wanted to see them again. Yuan gasped as his eyes lit up at the terrifying news of the spirit beast's injuries, yet immediately paused to realize that it was never the moment to discuss braised pork. He looked down at his pocket with a sad sigh, feeling really sorry for the bad creatures hiding there while his buyers waited on him. "Hey," he said, encouraging them to peek around the counter. There were just 3 left, so he promised they would get guaranteed profit if they bought these things. The crowd parted because they wanted a butchered one already. They didn't know how to heal them and had no money for a creator. So Yin went to the stall where the seller told him he was too late since the beasts were sold out and meat wouldn't sell anymore. Yuan clarified he wasn't there to buy meat, but rather wanted to see the spirit beasts inside. Yuan noticed the boss looked unstable, so he thought negotiating now might just kick him out. But right now, his mind works differently. He can see how the seller is getting calmer, which made it look like a miracle happened. The buyer told him that the man isn't old and was ready to call him Brother Yang. But when there were 3 heavily injured spirit creatures inside, he took them all safely away. The web sprayed everything except for his friend's beautiful abdomens, which were already ripped by this process and would never last much longer than a couple of days, if not for Smarty's warning about the foul smell. A brave spider named Uraniamorphe/Araniti was an ordinary but deadly grade 10 creature with a superpower called Lay Thread that spits out sharp silk for free and a poison net that sprays webs full of toxins. Yuan knew this rare find was the perfect way to turn them into copper spirits quickly. Without the dimensional rift, he would have been dead in no time at all. The trader said they'd likely fetch 300,000 Federation coins each on StarNet if they weren't hurt, yet the spirit creatures could also command higher prices. Now Yuan is hoping to grab those 2 spider webs, but he's running out of cash, so he proposed exchanging them for a spirit creature called Brother Yang. As he worked through that batch, he quickly understood that every kid has their own dreams and hopes, even if they weren't the real ones. Wouldn't Yuan be happy if the monsters in the school turned into green creepers and changed their minds? The salesman asked if they wanted to sell high-grade green creepers, checking the quality before inviting Yuan into the shop to inspect them firsthand. Brother Yang knew selling those green creepers would bring in lots of cash. Anyone asking the high price usually wants double what they're worth. He showed Yuan the last spirit creature left behind after clearing out all other ones. They poured their hearts and souls into that single animal. A rhino rock ox from the elite grade level 10 earth type, built for epic glory with a skill called rock horns that coats its horns in stone and launches reckless self-sacrificing charges. Another skill was sacrifice, where when a contractor gets hurt, it willingly shares Yuan's eyes to glimmer like a hero who saw something precious. He asked how much it would be selling for, because it was an epic quality creature about to reach copper rank and was perfect for Shui as a defensive tool. Brother Yang told him to be serious, even though his condition looked bad, because he had said it was perfect. He pointed out that the deal was worth only 200,000 Federation coins to make it a real deal. Yang and his friend looked around at the huge stone statue and decided they'd never make it back to the zoo, so they agreed to help one other kid get out of there, just in case he was going to leave soon. Yang brother shook his head and nodded, while Yuan smiled with a grin that made everyone feel safe. Yang trusted him, and now that he had taken all 3 spirit creatures, he packed his stall and headed out for a little while before meeting the green creepers. Good thing the spirit lockbox is right here. He'll just pack up the Rhino Rock OX and the web-spraying spider to bring them out, then toss it away and watch it grow even bigger. Smarty asked what happened, but he replied that it's a patented invention from Ostrich where they can store spirit creatures inside and make them light and easy to transport. Smarty was surprised to learn there's something good about having one, so he asked how they'd ever use such a big one. Yuan said their family never had the money for a spare cash box like that, but Rhino Rock OX couldn't believe it would really fit in there. Brother Yang felt heartbroken because the Rhino Rock Ox would never get the chance to evolve into a copper-ranked spirit creature like the spirit box in copper. So instead, he released his tumor-crowned fire lizards from this lizard family horned lizard genus, which is a copper-ranked 7 out of 10. These beasts have special skills where they shed fangs during bites and leave them embedded in the target's body, then twist and rotate their bodies as their mouth acts as the core to rip away flesh and bone, while also possessing an exclusive trait with burning venom that proliferating poison glands connect to the salivary glands, infusing its saliva with a burning toxin. He felt a huge hug against his chest as Yuan grinned at the spirit creature and asked if Yuan himself should have been amazed by its grace. Yuan was stunned by the rare chance to see a copper-ranked spirit creature right in front of him, and its burning venom gave it an incredibly sharp, offensive edge. Brother Yang watched his own child become an expert in a spirit researcher's specialty back at such a young age and decided to trust his own ability rather than someone else's guidance. Suddenly, a familiar voice shouted, "Brother Yang," as the world began to spin around them. He stood there with an angry, burning fire lizard in his hand, causing the other vendors to jump like terrified rabbits, while a fairy monkey also froze in shock. After he apologized and promised they'd leave immediately, everyone else seemed completely shocked by the sudden appearance of this dangerous beast. The 3 friends jumped out of their chairs as the giant fire lizard started roaring, so Yang and Yuan and Smarty sprinted off together. The journey was incredibly fast compared to the thick hooves of a donkey cart. Then, eventually they got there. Brother Yang said, "Oh no, it's really close." He also saw Yuan looking so fit most people wouldn't dare to take him on because his real thrill came from flying a spirit creature and looking down at it despite how sick he and Smarty looked after the ride, even though they were the first time riding such a copper-ranked beast. He stepped through the door with an expectation that this place was just plain, telling Yang to make himself quiet while Brother subtly watched the scenery. If those green creepers weren't up to par, their deal would be off since business is business. He stared at the towering green creepers like a puzzle, convinced that someone had to put them together for them to grow properly. It felt far too much beyond what Yuan expected when those rare prime quality items from Starnet just appeared in his hands before even his roots could fully develop. He had already added energy or soil, and now his root systems were all set, proving that the quality was perfect despite everything else. Yang watched the sap dripping off the knife with such a thick, vibrant quality, convinced himself the child hadn't been bluffing about being the highest caliber of talent he had ever seen. His eyes lit up as hope began to fill his heart, because things were finally working in his favor. He remembered visiting a master to find them who could give him the exact kind of spirit material he needed, yet there was nowhere else to look. Instead, He focused on making an impression by leaning towards Yuan's reputation. Yuan asked if he was happy with those green creepers. He said he really liked them, so now they were ready to discuss their prices. He looked at all those green creepers as if they were gold coins, promising to sell them like hotcakes on Starnet for 30,000 each. But his best deal was just 3,000 a single pot, with him taking the whole pot in return. The excitement of hearing the numbers made Smarty's head spin, so instead of thinking straight away, he decided to try and figure out what they were doing. Yuan readily accepted the offer because he had a large quantity needed to boost his spirit key rank, which made green creepers much easier. It wasn't a big deal at all, yet Yang noticed that Yuan seemed completely calm and unflappable even after agreeing to a big deal. Did you have time to wait for him? So Yuan said he would need a full week because his job is so hard. He worked 1 hour every day to get the spirits from the 16th moon to the first night of the 15th lunar month, then had to sleep for 10 days and still finish it all by the time of the first day. Yang thought hard about the mysterious gift he got, but his lucky charm had already shown up on purpose. After the exchange of Rhino Rock Ox and Green Creeper, Yuan told him to gather them in 7 days, so Yang didn't have to worry about a deposit for the rest of the pots. After Yuan promised he would return in a week, the whole family waited to find out when that deadline actually arrived. The boy carefully set down the large rock in the garden to let the wind blow over it. Ineen questioned whether he would stay with them forever, but Smarty insisted they couldn't afford it, and Yuan simply said they had to get him saved first. The Rhino Rock Ox knew he was very rusty, so he quickly checked the damage and then sped up a tiny bit as the scarps started healing back on their own. The Rhino Rock Ox barked loudly, sending more thunderous power through the air while Yuan stared wide-eyed at the roar, thinking the beast was somehow blocking his way toward the copper mines. The guys kept walking through the dark until the lights went out, and now everything was just a big black hole with them all inside. Then the ground trembled as a fissure opened wide, launching a mighty surge of power into the air. The Rhino Rock Ox made it into the giant bull family and topped that rank, earning a copper level 1 in the first 10 spots. It wasn't just metal. It was an iron-horned rhino ox with rock horn skills that coated its horns to deliver reckless charges while also taking on damage when its contractor got hurt. And then for the exclusive trait, Yuan could choose between scaled hide, where a layer of scale-like armor grew on its skin, made from the same material as itself, or the tireless Shrek that conserved stamina while running, or pain siphon, which absorbed damage and turned it into life force. Yuan struggled to pick his favorite trait because there were only 2 solid choices out of 3, leaving one as an untapped potential. He considered tireless Shrek as useless for defense, but scale hide could build up a thick layer of armor that helped him stay on top during charges. The scraping from those scales might give him a little extra damage, though the pain siphon ability let him absorb some loss and heal itself all at once. A tough guy who's desperate for a hit turned into a beast when his armor got thicker, making every blow feel even stronger. Now, the status is fully set. If Yuan had used his rock horns and pain siphon correctly to build that perfect positive feedback loop, he wouldn't be just wearing protective armor. He'd be a massive, offensive spirit creature dressed entirely in defense. Yuan felt so sure that no one could sneak up on Shui anymore, but Smarty smiled at the whole situation, thinking both the girl and the heavy-ringed rhinoceros ox were now a beautiful pair of friends. Yuan thought he cared little for what came next because, well, who needs to listen when his friend is already in trouble? He also made sure to point out that even the wild foxes like Smarty would be dangerous if they got into any fight. Yuan suddenly felt a surge of divine strength as his animal companion climbed higher on the hillside. Smarty felt like he had earned a massive boost by breaking the iron-horned rhino ox's neck in copper rank. So he looked at his bag full of gold and wondered just how high it would go if he used all those heavenly treasures instead. He asked Smarty about sending that beast to Shui, saying the ostrich logistics would handle everything for him since he was already making money and had a long day ahead. Smarty jumped in excitement when he heard this plan, racing back with his pack because he wanted to fly like Ineen. At the Hui Yuan Palace, someone began talking while arranging 3 distinct flavors. 1 chunk of fresh patulous sprouts, another slice from a deep pool of water called Sunken Sea Ebony, and a final scoop of glowing golden blood called Platinum Beast Blood Essence. The soldiers stood before the city lord, whose face held a gentle smile as he questioned about something hidden inside a glass vial. Beside him, an older lady stepped forward and gently cautioned him to keep his voice down. A solid object fell into the hole. She feels like she's shooting lightning right in the air. Suddenly, a woman with blonde hair appeared and poured a bright red liquid over everyone around her, while a thick cloud of fire erupted to cover the room. The towering figures behind her instinctively recoiled as they felt an overwhelming pressure that threatened to crush their very essence. 3 days ago, an excited creator summoned a 5-star spirit creature and told her friend, "This woman is the Moon Empress." She then shouted to the world that she was the Moon Empress, one of the 3 5-star creators of the Radiant Federation. Sikong, the king grade expert, was so relieved by seeing Ling Xiao, the queen of Violet Thorn City, smiling and confirming she had no worries. The sun goddess sent a friendly wave of gratitude, but when he reached for his dragon, the beast froze in place and looked around to see who was watching him. Sikong gasped as the black tiger with red spots stared at him from behind the glass, knowing the contents had spilled onto his face. The Moon Empress said, "It's just getting ready for something legendary," but she knew he'd need the Will-Rune to turn into a fantasy breed. After thanking her, he vowed to serve her like a loyal dog, ready to walk through fire and water while dying 1,000 times for her sake. A wild spirit creature's eyes suddenly shifted into a calm, clear blue. A loud roar woke up a tiny creature with a crescent moon marking its forehead. The black tiger with red marks felt a sudden shiver as it was suddenly awoken by that startling noise. The Moon Empress paused before him, knowing going through fire and water wouldn't be enough to save him. However, she quickly moved on to discuss how each promotion exam was held every 3 years, forcing one level at a time, so no single creator could truly advance beyond what they already had. Sikong said she was confirming that for this year's exam, one person could test for multiple levels, but it would only cover up to level 2. Anyone who passed the first level creator exam within 2 hours would be exempt from 3 lifestyle profession exams and could go straight for level 2. She told him to get ready and give the order. She said yes, but then he asked Xiao to tell him why nobody could see the special runes or understand the will anymore in those last few years. The Moon Empress smiled gently at the 2 talented young creations beside her, telling them that this was just a private matter between us as fellow 5-star creators without anyone else knowing. Naturally, she chose not to let these older fools fall behind them. She was truly shocked when she learned that the mysterious Moon Empress would step down and let a brave new apprentice take her place. Moon Empress whispered about the approaching dimensional tide, while Violet Thorn City stood guard against its most dangerous insect rifts. And as a loyal lord, Xiao promised to keep everyone safe, so failure could never happen. Meanwhile, Yuan sat atop the sky above them all, ready to protect these fragile lands forever. He asked the man if he was okay, and promised the ride would get smoother as soon as they climbed past that high wall, which made sure the vomiting got out of the way completely. The driver laughed as his 100 questions became lively, realizing their load was too heavy for this trip. Earlier, Smarty had a tantrum when he wanted to fly, but Ying held him and said she was already flying him over the place. Yuan promised to bring back something. Yuan told the driver that it would be okay, since there were plenty of other things for them to do sightseeing. The moonlight washed over the river, painting it in hues of gold and silver and turning it into something truly magical. Yuan stepped forward and said, "It's truly one of a kind." He felt like a detective discovering an unsolved mystery in the vast tapestry of his mind, wondering if that strange feeling was actually a magical spell waiting to be cast. A very important thing is a specific attribute that makes a spirit chi professional feel special from nature itself. It acts like an essential item for raising a fantasy breed. When Yuan held this rune in his hands, he suddenly knew what it meant. It was actually the perfect symbol of mountains and rivers, and he immediately thought about which creature would fit best with it. He laughed nervously as the driver asked if everything was all right. "Oh," he said, "just fine, actually." Then he turned his head toward the town far away where all the clouds were turning into violet thorns and people flew in high-flying jets. Yuan was shocked by the news that they couldn't reach it until morning. The driver told him all about his flight sickness, which forced him to slow down so he could follow along safely. Yuan looked away from the man standing still and sped up his car, making sure he followed exactly where the instructions said he had to go. At school, students got confused when they were told to contract spirit creatures for today. Yet instead of running away, they ended up in the training grounds. One guy said his schedule had changed, and right after contracting spirits, there was a big practical combat class that moved so far up the grade. Everyone heard rumors about Violet Thorn's 100 Sons, but it turned out because one student had a friend who complained to him during the academic year. The teacher announced to the class that every session would be dedicated to practical combat drills for third-year students, setting up an exciting new test where they had to face off against third-year counterparts in real battle scenarios. Soon after their contracts were sealed, they were paired with fourth-year rivals for intense practice battles, and when they drew their numbers, they were faced with spirit beasts just like those from the first year. Even the student beside Shui felt nervous about her own contract. She wondered if it would actually be possible to summon a grave beetle in such an explosive situation. Shui smiled warmly as she finally took the beautiful flower back from the shelf. The fight began with the sharp teeth of a fierce beast tearing through the air as a tiny, fragile spirit creature stumbled away in fear from its huge predator. The first year Squirrel fled the war, but that same year, a complaining freshman shouted out because he felt cheated out of his first contract by an older student who had already fought long before him. The situation was completely one-sided, and Shui was next. She was the class champion, so everyone hoped she could raise their flag to show they were fair again. The teacher shouted that the 9th battle had started. He asked everyone if they were prepared, and one third-year student answered proudly, yes. The first year recognized him as Feng Lixing, though his family's connection to a guild leader made things hard. Even though he had fought well in the Violet Thorn's 100 Sons, the problem was that his spirit creature seemed ill-equipped for the fight. Deep inside Lixing's heart, a sudden surge of joy washed over him as the Creators Guild finally sent his news last night. Now standing amidst those stepping stones to boost his win rate felt like heaven was on his side, no longer just for the Violet Thorn's 100 Sons, but also for becoming a disciple of the Moon Empress. So he heard the very first year, named Shui said she would take on a gray beetle, and if she did, she wouldn't really get much of a shot at winning. Shui stepped forward with a fierce determination, refusing to let the tiny gray beetle win her over at all costs. She was almost done telling the truth and started laughing as the world rushed by. She dragged the ghost down into the hall like a beast of prey. She had nothing better to do than throw her yellow-spotted puppy into an arena of gray beetles, knowing that this would be her best performance ever. Suddenly, the birds heard a command and stood their ground while a massive bird swooped overhead. The sky turned bright with the color of fresh spring, as Yuan leaped down from the clouds and dropped gently onto the dusty path near Xiao Li's house. He bowed deeply, offering a warm smile to the teacher who had just walked out, and proudly explained that he had brought Shui's spirit creature home for her brother's birthday party. She smiled when she saw him smile on the day he promised to help make it work out. Despite her cautious suspicion, the teacher wanted to know if the kids would actually depend on this trick before she checked out that yellow-spotted dog just to make sure they were truly following rules. Lixing laughed as he explained to his team that no matter what spirit creature was there, their longtime champion couldn't win because none of them were strong enough for him. The Strength King beetle is a rare copper-level insect with amazing skills like giant horns and a powerful charge, plus the unique trait that lets it see right through others' camouflage. She felt so scared when she saw the giant beetle in its place of a yellow-spotted dog, even though the beast was massive and could crush anything. Shui looked around and realized someone had handed her an empty box, but she didn't know where to put it or what to do with it. The owner asked if the box contained a spirit lock, which made Shui think her family was rich. She began to wonder why their brother had sold the store so easily before he even knew about her. He gently pushed her away from worrying about things too much and brought her attention straight back to what she actually had to do next. She made a promise to herself that she'd never break up with him again. She didn't stop him from trying hard, so she gave him a chance and then signed a deal. A group of curious students gathered around a strange object, whispering about the mysterious spirit creature they found in their empty room. It felt like a piece of metal and sounded too loud to be real. Lixing admitted his entrance was impressive, yet despite having combat skills, he still felt guilty that he couldn't save his own bankruptcy simply by accepting such an iron ore. Shui said they wouldn't know the match's end until the iron-horned Rhinotaur finished its fight. Then she would use rock horns instead of human ones to impress the copper-ranked teacher and show off her thorough skill. That monster could easily be called a top-tier defense-type spirit, with a rhino horn worth 7 million coins in gold, but Yuan told her to treat it as a professional habit rather than just a price tag for a festival coin. Lixing laughed at the clash of a rhino's huge horn against a small beetle's tiny one, calling her friend naive because she didn't think they needed more fighting skills. After that, he looked absolutely ready to unleash his superpower and make everyone else fear for their lives as an aggressive spirit beast. The giant horn stood right in front of him as he rode out a wild ride. The iron-horned Rhinotaur stood firm in the field, while Shui held her ground with equal strength. A small handful of extra talent allowed Lixing to push the beast's wings back, and even then, they'd have pushed it out again. She watched Shui carefully while she used her spirit chi to keep the beast alive for just a little bit longer after that initial contract ended. The teacher felt so relieved when the team didn't get knocked out during the match, yet she made sure Shui remained reckless and even attacked on purpose to prove how little they had learned in the field. However, it was only Yuan who truly understood why that wasn't true at all. Shui learned how to attack proactively right after contracting her iron-horned Rhinotaur, which caused the whole class to scramble thinking about what that buzzing beetle was up to because it was hopping so quickly across the large iron ox. Lixing heard the noise, but in his mind he saw them as idiots, and there was no other reason why the power assault spirit creature started off with such an excuse for landing a fatal blow. He shouted that the little girl had made a huge mistake by imagining she would face exactly what she was about to meet. Xue stepped back from the roaring charge and felt her heart hammer against her ribs as a thick cloud of smoke swallowed the entire battlefield, leaving the beast's horn shell completely invisible to her eyes. The team charged with such a massive power that they were already expecting to take out the boss before he could even finish his turn. He wasn't just a regular fighter. He was a power-level monster who was known specifically for taking one hit and finishing off an opponent instantly. Even though the teacher kept the same plan, it felt hopeless if Xue tried her hardest to channel Spirit Chi and keep the hit down, but she still managed to wear away the damage by just being knocked out every time they fought a third year against a first year in practice. Xue told the iron-horned Rhinotaur to act now. But immediately the students scrambled in confusion as the Spirit Chi around its head shifted wildly. It changed from pain into healing power because the teacher had learned that this special ability could absorb damage and turn it back into strength, a rare skill no one else could ever learn. You had to smile so hard that Yuan felt a sudden rush of pride just as she finally grabbed the animal by its horns, even though it was her very first practical fight, and she was completely new at seeing such a beast. Lixing shouted that even if this creature had an iron hide, it was still a slightly tougher punching bag as he made Strength King Beetle continue the attack, while the students were amazed by its iron-horned rhino ox because its life force hadn't decreased at all after so many, but just kept taking damage. The teacher reached out and asked Yuan if the iron-horned rhino ox he'd picked had any counterattack skills. She didn't care, knowing Xue was taking damage without a fight back. He told her to quiet down and reminded her that she said Xue has an affinity for defense-type spirit creatures, so she must have her own plan. The Strength King Beetle obeyed Lixing's command and struck down the giant horn ram with a single, powerful blow. Yuan adjusted her boots on soft earth while Xue roared loudly at the horns of an iron-horned rhino, which refused to move forward because the ground wasn't clear enough for them. She smiled broadly and felt proud that she had chosen this path over a safer alternative. Lixing felt so angry she started using cheap magic tricks when he told the iron-rimmed rhinos to hit her with their horns, causing a big fight. The debris rushed through the air while King of Debris and the iron-horned rhino kept moving, their horns snapping together like a thunderclap as they fought each other. Oh! Their jaws dropped instantly as the massive iron ox stood up to face them. The match felt unfair at first glance, but the strength of the King Beetle proved to be the deciding factor, leaving them completely stunned. The teacher explained how the Strength King Beetle acted like a brave hero who gave up his own life to defeat giants. So when it hit the iron-horned rhino, the beetle didn't lose much, but still got hurt along with it. The beast was probably built just for power and exacting shots, which means it could easily dodge attacks from spirits of the same level. Even though Yuan thought his high-quality assault would win easily, he knew one moment might slip away if he didn't get the upper hand right away. They noticed the king beetle slipping out of its shell and immediately dismissed it as mere luck. Yet their teacher explained that such balance is simply a biological limitation inherent to insects compared to an iron-horned rhino. The reality was that both animals are just spirit creatures during intense battles, and the contractor's mental state also plays a crucial role in whether these powerful beings can endure prolonged struggle. Lixing was so frustrated because his new spirit beast was too strong to stop the villain's attacks. He ordered a giant beetle to swing hard enough to crush the tiny girl right in front of him. He stood tall in the tall grass and let the beetle fly across the sky. The tiger rolled toward Xue, and the teacher said he felt wrong because it hurt his hope for a good day. The iron-horned rhino ox obeyed his master's command. He stopped riding the clouds and climbed onto a jagged cliff, ready to face the crushing weight of the beetles that were waiting for him. The grass turned soft as the team fell down, and suddenly everything was settled. Xue was declared the champion because he saved them from being crushed by the wind at the edge of the field. Xue finally realized the rock horns were a clever trick to build up enough stones so the final, incredibly strong beetle could flip the Strength King. The student who had high expectations didn't disappoint. She patted Yuan at the back while praising him for getting his hands on something valuable. Yuan gently told her to settle down because her slap was quite. Xue ran and hugged her brother. He congratulated her, but she pouted and asked where the money came from. She also inquired if he sold their shop, or what would happen if he couldn't have any funds. Her anxiety for his health made her worry deeply, while he calmly told her no and assured her that everything was all better and business was booming. The teacher hesitated before speaking again, realizing that there wasn't enough time left and wanted to hurry up so she could speak quickly. She told Yuan about Xue's genius and how much the school hoped to choose her for the preliminary section of the Violet Thorn's 100 Suns. The Violet Thorn's 100 Sun selection is the most basic regional goal, with the ultimate aim of securing a spot in the Radiant Federation's top-tier national contest, even though Shui was just a first-year high schooler whose talent alone would have been enough to make her a finalist. Yuan smiled at Shui after helping with Shui's spirit creatures and resources, promising to continue working hard on them all along. When Shui said she needed something else to do today, Yuan simply told her she could show her brother around the school instead. The yellow spotted dog made Yuan nervous because her teacher had promised to take care of it for sure. Yuan was thrilled to get his snacks while checking Yuan's spirit key, so he asked what more proof Yuxiang actually needed. She realized she had to see it with her own eyes to truly be relieved, knowing the iron-horned rhino ox must have cost a lot of money. When the man showed her the bank account, her pupils dilated instantly as he revealed the staggering number of zeros, proving she had finally found an inspiration for his new career as a digital creator. He encouraged her to focus on studies, participate in selections, and aim for a high ranking while Yuan explained he would also take the certification exam. She loved him and felt happy about his plans. Then they celebrated together and enjoyed a good meal where she said she was ready to eat hot. And while the teacher asked the yellow spotted dog whether it really ate those meat buns, the real MVP of the day was realizing that everyone else would be just as eager to see if it got back home. It felt like a rush to get back home after the long trip, but seeing how hard it was for Shui meant he would need to push harder than ever before. The researcher couldn't afford the first aid books, so he found Smarty with some help. During that day's intense combat, Shui seized the chance only because she could deflect all damage with the skill's unique reflection mechanic. However, while she managed plenty of spirit keys, his lack of even one meant he couldn't claim to be a true specialist. No matter how hard he tried to get his Mobius abilities unlocked, that special spirit's strict rules kept him stuck in a bad spot. He felt a big jump in his stomach as the plane burst into the air. Yuan had a big plan for his Blackwing Falcon, but the driver was trying to impress customers by showing him how fast he could go to get those great reviews. He told Yuan that he still had a lot of purchases waiting and suggested ordering something on StarNet using Ostrich Logistics, so it would be delivered today. Yuan handed him a bag and said, "The bird is dry," but Yuan didn't answer the question. "You have all received a fantastic review. The driver told you could be totally relaxed now that your journey is finished, and since everything has been delivered just as you wanted, the driver reminded him to give everyone a great review." Yuan promised it was all right, and then he happily thanked them for their hard work. His online shop was a treasure chest of boxes that made him forget the scary spirit market entirely. Now, the next time he sees one, he will just buy the items and never return to danger. One day, Smarty announced his new identity as a sly cat, and Ineen happily returned with an extra round of hugs. Smarty couldn't help it. He'd been staring at the wall for hours, but then he suddenly realized someone had just left him standing there. He stopped trying to hide and decided to tell everyone exactly what was going on. Ineen told Yuan not to get angry because she had already booked a flight for him. Yuan promised her next time would be just as sweet. Smarty stayed stubborn even when braised pork didn't cheer him up, and while Yuan thought his childishness was the problem, it turned out that he was actually fully prepared. A sad friend sat down and said, "I am sorry," but his face turned bright red as he tried to say more. Yuan picked up the fresh cat food and instantly felt delighted because it smelled so good. That happiness quickly turned into a long nap since he couldn't stop craving the scent anymore. Afterward, Yuan decided to give the snack away instead of keeping it for himself forever, making sure Smarty wouldn't regret eating it every day. Ineen stared at Yuan with a wide grin, eyes shining as she showed him the rare green creeper she had been secretly keeping hidden for years. He watched with a mix of relief and amusement, knowing exactly what this secret pot meant to her once he finally let it go. The boy named Smarty watched as Yuan carried a heavy load of boxes. So he asked, "Are you hungry?" and explained that even though Yuan was carrying items, there was still plenty left for him to eat next time. It turned out when he finished making all those pots, the shop was completely packed, even as Smarty whispered that something just wasn't right about how much had been brought in. Ineen peered closely at the new plant and asked if it was anything else. A card told him he could get free a single lotus from the same group, because buying 100 pots of green creepers made him eligible, and he was completely surprised by such an offer. Yuan smiled as he recalled his special powers because those spirits who helped him were all nature-based. Healing plants, supportive beasts, and magical life forms. A gentle plant spirit with a natural healing power blinked its sparkling eyes, confirming the exact need he had for his magic. He told Smarty and Ineen to stay down so they could tend to the creeping weeds on the floor instead. Yuan went upstairs and unlocked his special lock with a magic spark that made everything feel like a game ready for action. He hadn't rested in a long time, and so his mental power wasn't quite in its best shape yet. But since he had already begun, there is no way back to the previous level. He was thrilled that, unlike before, there was absolutely no drain on his mental power at all, as long as he kept injecting the spirit key into the machine. After all, he could start chaining levels next with this new magic. 1 hour passed, as Lily Loara turned into a legendary healer who instantly cures wounds, and Yuan felt relieved he had finally leveled up. She walked into a dark room and found something incredibly strange. A creature that looked like an alien with no known name, yet somehow had reached elite status in its own kind. It had kept its abilities exactly as it was, even though its species was unknown to everyone else around him. He gasped at the sudden light that glowed brightly when he arrived in Mobius's locked spirit space, realizing it was much bigger than before. Suddenly, someone spoke to Yuan asking if he could hear him clearly. Yuan replied that he could hear him loud and clear and greeted Mobius with a warm smile, saying it had been a while. Zhu shared a quick little lesson. When a spirit professional signs a deal with a spirit creature, they must give up some of their own power. You can't sign more than 3 at once, because that would eat away all your mental strength in one go. Mobius had locked his own spirit, so it could act like a contract without him having to work hard for it. The real price was that he paid himself for every level he climbed, and he decided only those who showed interest would be hired. And then suddenly, when Yuan signed up with Mobius for 10 more years, his ability to feel spirit chi vanished instantly, leaving his mind completely weak on its own. It wouldn't be any better for Yuan if he stayed that way today. The boy Yuan stepped back and told Mobius that he was ready to finally talk again. Mobius said he could still reach elite grade and feel like a genius because his own design is truly so special. Mobius smiled, pointing out the secret rule. Space isn't just a place, it's his absolute magic weapon. Yuan wanted to know why Yuan hadn't felt any spirit chi on the pool, but Mobius explained it was simply ordinary water and he couldn't get a better answer either. Mobius said water makes Yuan feel special, but when he threw a flower pot stone at thee, and it still seemed to glow with hidden spirit energy, even though most low-quality stones just leak out of their outer environment. However, since the lock prevents that leakage, if those better stones were put in properly, the spirit chi would grow very rich over time. Yuan cheered with joy because strengthening his spirit made those magical beings work so much more efficiently, and Mobius agreed that as he climbed higher in power, even more of their useful time became available to him. Yuan realized that supporting those massive energy stones would cost way too much. Even the cheapest ones wouldn't be worth it, so his body began to crumble, and he started getting worried about what was wrong. He then said clearly that it was nothing, because he couldn't maintain such a clear state of communication for half an hour at once. Yuan had spent 10 years regretting how much he hurt his own mind by using a spirit creature to help him see his mind's true powers. Yuan smiled and said, "It doesn't matter because those 10 years alone let me learn a lot. Besides, now he's back with a spark of hope while the road ahead remains a long, winding journey to try and find his way home." It was the first truly real step that would be made after all this hard work. He fell into a heavy, quiet slumber where sleep had won over the world as the greatest force majeure. The next morning he tried once more to scare off those scary green monsters with his magic. As a boy who spent his days scrolling through the web for fun, he found himself alone in the vast digital world. Yuan put in 3 solid days of work every day, so by the end she had earned a big paycheck and felt very proud. The sun went down into the dark, so when the old man finished his work, Een and Smarty drifted off to sleep together. And he slipped into a far corner where the 2 spider creatures needed healing, saving both of them along with the treasure from his leveling adventure. 7 days later, Brother Yang stepped into Yuan's shop right before turning back on the way home, and then took a deep breath, praying for a moment to change his fate once more. He spent hours thinking about how hard making hundreds of green creepers at once really is, and then just happened to find himself inside a shop selling spirits from an ancient place. The door swung open, and Yuan looked surprised to see a stranger standing there. He couldn't have known that this man would be eager enough to agree right away on the deal they were about to make, especially when that person was so desperate for help. Yang had already practiced making sure the space inside Yuan's new room would work, knowing that even with just 30 pots, he'd find something to hope for when he finally met his spirit creature. And on his left, there were so many pots piled up all over the place. Yuan told him the group had arrived. Originally, they needed to grab 7 6-pot dishes from 100, which made his heart skip for pure amazement at what they were about to do with all that much money. Yuan smiled at the news that Yuan had already cut off all his future happiness, so he couldn't be flattered anymore. Brother Yang knew exactly how much money would be on the table before any trade could begin, so he refused to make an even cent down and told him his name while remembering that he had met a noble person in his life. He promised to know that this was truly his sworn brother. He told him exactly how much money he was going to spend when he got his car. He stood at the door before he went out and told the old man how much better it would be if he had a new home instead of just waiting around. even though the old man said he only wanted to keep his breeding base in place so he could come visit him whenever he liked. Seeing how happy Brother Yang seemed so incredibly delighted, Yuan immediately understood that the job of creating something new was not only a great career, but also very exciting to do. Now that the room felt empty, it was time for him to restock. He asked Smarty if he had already figured out what he needed to do. Yuan jumped back in panic when Smarty shouted that something terrible had happened. Yuan laughed as he saw the sad face of a fat guy who finally got better than before, while he watched his stats rise from a dull number to becoming an elite warrior instantly. You asked Yuan how much smarter he felt. The boy answered proudly, saying yes, though he knew his true boost came from a natural gift he never taught anyone. Before, Yuan remembered only one energy biscuit worth of memories, but now he can recall as much as 5. When Smarty switched his favorite food from braised pork to those energy biscuits, Yuan was so surprised that he asked him if there would be a lot of other things he needed help with. Yuan searched frantically for Een as Smarty bravely declared, "I can trust you with this." At that moment, Een screamed about the bad situation again, and knowing that Yuan had seen the same scene worried her that she might have become sick. Smarty already figured out how to answer, saying she just leveled up. Yuan checked her stats, and she was already at elite grade level 2. Her skills were Sound Spike. She fired a sonic beam aimed at a target, and Turbulence, where she flapped her wings to create constant, rapid, and chaotic airflow. Basically, it looked like her combat skills. Yuan asked why those unrelated abilities weren't tied to singing. It turns out Smarty was testing his own hidden talents before anyone else could see them. Yuan spotted a board on the wall, so he asked if those marks were actually from sudden loud noise. When Een said she heard them playing alone without him around, Smarty immediately offered to try it over once more, hoping the magic would boost again. You were holding the board when Een warned you about how dangerous the proximity to the target made everything feel. Then suddenly, Yuan started his sound spike experiment in full swing. Smarty smiled and said, "Okay, she's going to hit that target really well." His eyes flashed wide like a storm cloud, and his jaw dropped with the sudden shock of knowing someone was about to hurt him. Yuan gently stroked Een hair as a sudden rush of wind surged through the room, knocking over everything in its way. Yuan watched as the power grew so strong it felt nearly equal to when he had been a regular student, prompting him to realize that Een was truly his favorite combat spirit pet. Yuan handed over his goods to a stranger while he quietly signed a paper. Meanwhile, Smarty nudged him back toward Een, whispering, "You know that you can still feel the heat on my face?" The girl Yuan couldn't take her eyes off the other side of En's face after she'd been doing this all along. Smarty stared as he carefully laid down the 100-question beast on the table. "Let her take a good break," he told her, "and here's where you'll find it." Smartly, he nudged him gently, so they could both speak freely about whatever happened next. "You told Yuan to feed those 2 wild, spray-covered spiders." Smarty felt a jolt of nerves as he reached for the spider, wondering if he would accidentally bite one while trying to save his friend from the great arachnid. Yuan laughed and nudged a friend around while quietly telling them to keep track of those mysterious spirits in the store, so Smarty soon took over everything and managed it all from there on. Smartly spotted the web spiders shooting off colorful lights, and he knew exactly which color meant they were moving forward. The insects sprayed webs to form tough cocoons, so Smarty found Yuan's new technology impressive because it allowed them both to evolve at the same time. When they first arrived, their iron-horned rhino-wax backs were waiting for evolution, but they got hurt badly in a clumsy accident before anyone could revive them with enough life to push forward again. 2 hours later, the spider emerged from its dark chamber. One had an evolutionary drift toward reversion to ancient habits, while the other underwent a spiritual mutation that turned sticky into strength. Its unique poison spreads throughout every web, causing intense toxicity everywhere it touches. The other's new trait makes even the most fragile of webs strong enough to hold anything against them. It made absolutely no sense to see these two groups moving in totally opposite ways at the same time. Yuan wasn't surprised by this incredible discovery because his grandfather had already prepared everything for their future success. The customer stared at the phone screen and asked, "Are they selling?" The shop owner hadn't even turned off the light yet when the question was raised. Yuan laughed, taking a closer look at the display before moving on to his next project. Smartly pushed him away from the name No Lost Spirit Creature Store, because he already had one ready to share, yet he kept typing anyway before his username became Deep Mountain Old Forest. After Yuan checked in on the StarNet receiver, he knew they'd get the car before anything else and tested it right away to see how well it worked. Yuan tapped on the pots and pulled back in the room where spiders live, wondering if Smarty needed scanning too. He said it was top priority and played with his friend like he was in trouble after a while. As they talked, their background shifted. Smarty asked for directions, and Yuan explained that it's just a store inside StarNet, not all online shopping. A giant mansion stood beside the empty house, doubling the original size, while StarNet, a world made of pure code, showed up as that same massive virtual reflection on the screen. Smarty wondered why the decorations from their home weren't there. Yuan replied that it was because the decorations inside StarNet